When you're staining your joint frame, your trim, first make sure you have all the stuff you need. I have my pieces of trim laid out, I have my joint frame, I have my stain, and I have, since I'm using two different colors, I have two different rags. I'm going to start by staining these trim boards, and I'm going to stain these a light color. In my frame, I'm going to have a light colored trim and a darker colored frame. You can go multi-colors, like a two-tone design if you want, or you can use all the same. Now when you're staining, take a real light amount of stain on the rag, and then you can rub it right into the wood. Now the biggest problem that we have with staining is streaks. So be really careful not to get dark streaks of stain on your material. Easy to do, especially on these little boards. So this one has been stained. I'll set that over here. Difference. Now I'll do my next one. Just take a really, really little bit on the end of the rag. A mistake students make is that they use too much stain. Just enough to cover is plenty on these little pieces. If you use too much, you're going to make a big mess. Also, even though I'm wearing gloves, I'm trying to keep as much of this stain off of my hands as possible, because sometimes you can get little rips or tears in the glove and you get it all over your fingers anyway. So I'm trying to keep my hands as clean as possible during this process. If you're using two colors of stain, start with the lighter color. That way, if you get any stain from your first coat onto your second coat, it's not going to affect it as much. If you would stain with dark color first, and if you mixed and got some darker colored stain where you want a lighter color stain to go, that would be very obvious in your finished project. This way, if I get a little bit of light stain where my darker stain goes, it's not going to be noticeable. So I'm just taking the edge of my rag and going down each side. Make sure there's no drips. There's a white spot here. That's either wood glue or maybe a piece of the sticker that came on the board. So that's done. I can take this old rag. I'm just going to take the dry side and kind of clean my mess up here on the paper, and then that can get thrown in the trash bag. Next, I'm going to put some stain on my frame. I'm going to start on the back side, because that way when I flip it, the front will be facing down on the paper. Again, take a little bit of stain on the edge of your rag. Try to keep it off your hands and gloves if possible. And just work it into the wood with the grain. This stain color is called rosewood. The lighter colored stain I used on the inside trim is called golden oak. You can pick any color stains that you want though. Now if you did a poor job sanding, any scratches, any marks in the board are going to show up now when you get stain on. So I'm taking a little bit of stain on the front of the rag and just rubbing it into the wood. After the stain is all worked in, I'm going to take the back of the rag that's still dry and just kind of wipe off any blotches that I have. So I got a few blotches in here. I'm just going to take the back of the rag and wipe that off. Don't worry about getting any stain down inside the pocket holes. You can leave those unstained. Okay, the back's pretty good. Now I'll get these inside edges. Just a little bit of stain on the rag. Don't have to overdo it. Now if you see any white spots, that's areas where you got some glue that spilled out and it wasn't either sanded off properly or it was left there. Some parts, it's going to be really hard to get that glue out. You may just have to leave it. The darker the stain you use, the more obvious any glue is in your project. So I'm just rotating it and staining this bottom side as I turn it. Once I have those inside edges done, now I'll do the outsides the same way. My example here has some extra holes because I had to redo part of my video. Yours should not have extra holes there. You should have just the 2 plugged holes. I got a little heavy on stain there, so I'm going to come back and wipe that off. Main thing you want to look for here is to make sure that you don't have any blotches of stain. That's the biggest mistake students make when staining, is they have too much stain in certain places. So always be on the lookout for any blotches of stain. The way you avoid that in the first place is by putting the stain on just a little bit at a time. If you put it on too heavy, I can guarantee you're going to have some blotchy spots that don't look good. So now I'm going to do the front last because this is the most important part of the frame and I want this to look the best. So I want to do this last, that way I can avoid getting fingerprints on it and getting any stain blotches on it. Again, go with the grain. If you have some extra stain on, you can always try and move that around to the other side. So you've got some marks here, a little streak here. Now I'll get the last edge up here. There. That looks pretty good. Make sure you double check around and see that there are no mist spots and no splotches of stain. Oh, I have some mist spots up here. There. Once you're all stained, you're in good shape. You can leave it sit on the table until it all dries. And then we'll either move it to your cubby if it fits, or I'll move it off to another part of the classroom where it can dry.